Jack gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as ghosts in the dim cabin light. Another haul, another night. The road stretched out before him like a never-ending ribbon of asphalt, a path he knew all too well. He'd been king of the road for 20 years, hauling freight through the heart of America. From the bustling cities to the quiet, forgotten towns, he had seen it all. The road was his domain, and he ruled it with a steady hand and a determined heart. Tonight, his kingdom was the Mojave Desert, a place as unforgiving as it was vast. The stars above were like distant, cold eyes watching his every move, and the desert floor seemed to stretch on forever, a barren wasteland of sand and rock. The air crackled with an unsettling stillness, the silence broken only by the low hum of his engine and the occasional lonely howl of a coyote in the distance. It was a symphony of solitude, a melody he had grown accustomed to over the years. Jack was used to the solitude, even welcomed it. The quiet gave him time to think, to reflect on the miles he had traveled and the ones still ahead. It was a time for introspection, a rare commodity in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Out here it was just him, his rig and the open road. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. It was as if the desert itself was whispering secrets, secrets that he wasn't meant to hear. The air hung heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. It was a feeling he couldn't ignore, a warning that something was amiss. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, the numbers glowing eerily in the darkness. He chalked it up to fatigue, told himself it was just the desert playing tricks on him. The long hours and endless miles had a way of wearing a man down, making him see things that weren't really there. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He'd been pushing hard, trying to make up for lost time. The deadlines were tight and the pressure was always on. But tonight the urgency felt different, more pressing. It was as if the very air was urging him to move faster, to get to his destination as quickly as possible. But deep down, a shiver of unease ran down his spine. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, a sense that something was watching him from the shadows. The desert was alive with secrets, and tonight it felt like they were all closing in on him. The highway stretched out before him, a black ribbon unfurling under the pale glow of the moon. The vastness of the desert was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Out here there was nowhere to hide, no one to hear you scream. The darkness held 1,000 secrets, and tonight it felt like some of them were watching him. The air inside the cab felt thick and heavy. The silence outside was almost complete, broken only by the rhythmic swoosh of his tires on the asphalt. Jack found himself holding his breath, listening for any sound, any sign of life in the desolate landscape. He had been on this road countless times before, but he had never felt so utterly alone, so completely exposed. A flicker of light on the horizon caught Jack's eye. He squinted, his gaze piercing the darkness. A car pulled off to the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking a desperate SOS. Jack felt a pang of concern. Out here, a breakdown could be a death sentence. The desert showed no mercy, especially not at night. He slowed his rig, debating whether to stop. He wasn't supposed to stop for anything out here. Company policy, they called it. But the Good Samaritan in him couldn't ignore someone in need. He pulled over a safe distance behind the car, the diesel engine rumbling to a stop. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the cool night air, the silence even more profound after the drone of the engine. The car, a battered sedan, was shrouded in an eerie silence. Jack approached cautiously, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The driver's side window was rolled down, but the car appeared empty. He rapped his knuckles on the roof. "Hello? Anybody in there?" His voice echoed in the stillness, unanswered. He circled the vehicle, noting the out-of-state plates and the layer of dust that suggested it had been sitting there for a while. The trunk was slightly ajar. Curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of unease, gnawed at him. He knew he should just get back in his truck and call it in. But something kept him there, some unseen force pulling him closer to the silent car. Taking a deep breath, Jack reached for the trunk latch. His hand trembled slightly. A shiver ran down his spine as his fingers brushed against the cold metal. He popped the trunk, the sudden movement breaking the silence like a gunshot. The beam of his flashlight revealed a jumble of clothes and a spare tire. And then he saw it. A hand, pale and lifeless, reached out from beneath a pile of blankets. Jack stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs. A strangled cry escaped his lips. He had stumbled into something sinister. He knew it. Fear, raw and primal, pulsed through him, urging him to run, to get away as fast as he could. A twig snapped behind him. Jack whirled around, his flashlight beam wildly searching the darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the darkness. He caught a glimpse of eyes, cold and sharp as shards of ice. "Don't move," the figure rasped, his voice a chilling whisper that seemed to slither through the night air. Jack didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled back towards his truck, his blood turning to ice in his veins. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get a grip. He had to get out of there, had to get help. The engine roared to life, a sound both comforting and terrifying in the stillness of the desert. He slammed the truck into gear and hit the gas, the big rig lurching forward. He glanced in his rearview mirror just in time to see the other car, headlights blazing, speeding towards him. Adrenaline surged through him. He pushed the accelerator to the floor, the engine groaning in protest as he picked up speed. He wasn't going to stick around to find out what that man wanted. The truck swayed precariously as he navigated the winding desert road, the dark landscape blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope of shadows and light. The flashing lights appeared in the distance, red and blue cutting through the darkness, like beacons of hope in the vast, empty desert night. Salvation. He had never been so relieved to see police lights in his life. The isolation of the desert had never felt so oppressive until that moment. He pulled over to the side of the road, his heart still pounding in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The silence of the night was broken only by the hum of his engine and the distant wail of the sirens. The police cruiser screeched to a halt behind him, and two officers approached cautiously, their hands resting on their holsters, ready for anything. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack stumbled out of the truck, his words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and adrenaline. He could barely keep his thoughts straight, the events of the night replaying in his mind. He told them about the car, the body in the trunk, the man in the shadows. Every detail seemed to spill out of him uncontrollably, as if speaking them aloud would make them less real. They listened patiently, their expressions unreadable, absorbing every word. The gravity of his story weighed heavily in the cool night air. When he was finished, they exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. It was clear they understood the severity of the situation. One of them placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort in the midst of chaos. It was a small but significant act of humanity. "We'll take it from here, sir." The words were a promise of safety, a guarantee that he was no longer alone in this nightmare. The officers would handle it from here, and Jack felt a glimmer of hope for the first time that night. The police searched for hours, but the car and the mysterious man were gone, vanished into the night like a phantom. No trace of them was ever found. The abandoned car, the body, the chase, it was like it had never happened at all. The officers, their faces grim, told him they would investigate, but Jack could tell by their tone that they didn't believe his story. He continued his route, his mind racing. Had he imagined the whole thing? Was the desert heat finally getting to him? He had always dismissed stories of the supernatural, but now he wasn't so sure. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Jack still drove the open road, the vast expanse of asphalt stretching endlessly before him, but he was never the same. The once familiar hum of the engine now seemed to carry a different tune, one tinged with unease. The encounter had left an invisible scar, a mark that no one could see but him, a constant reminder of the night he came face to face with the unknown. The darkness seemed deeper now, the shadows more menacing. He was more cautious now, every turn of the wheel a calculated move, more wary of the shadows that danced at the edge of his headlights. Each flicker of movement in the periphery of his vision set his heart racing. The open road, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, a place where he felt truly alive, now held a new kind of fear. The thrill of the journey had been replaced by a gnawing dread. He often found himself thinking about the man in the shadows, the figure that had appeared so suddenly and vanished just as quickly, his cold eyes burning into his memory. Who was he? What did he want? Was he real, a spectre of the night, or just a figment of a nightmare? The questions haunted him, lingering in the back of his mind, echoing in the silence of his long, lonely drives. The solitude of the desert, once a comfort, now felt oppressive. He knew he might never have the answers, that the truth might forever elude him, and that was the most terrifying thought of all. The Mojave Desert, once his kingdom, his sanctuary, was now a constant reminder of the night his world shifted on its axis, the night everything changed, the night he learned that some mysteries are better left unsolved. The road ahead was still long, but it was no longer the same journey.